Oh, hello there. How you doing? Welcome back to yet another Pantheon community watch party for the developer update stream. I'm going to adjust my camera here a little bit so that it's not cutting my head off. There we go. It's been a little while. It's been about a month, actually, to be exact, since we've had one of these. Because if you were not aware, the developers have kind of adjusted their content output schedule to be doing these developer updates once a month now from moving forward. Not entirely surprising, to be honest. When I remember, I think it was like on one of these streams when they first announced that they were going to be doing these every 2 weeks. I know a lot of the people in the community were talking like, is this going to be sustainable? Like, that's a pretty aggressive schedule. Turned out it wasn't sustainable. So but I think it's probably, so I think this is probably going to be a good move moving forward. So they're going for more of like a quality over quantity approach to it, which I am a fan of. If you noticed, I haven't really even been making many YouTube videos myself lately because I personally have that same approach. Like, if I'm going to put a video out, I want you guys to know that it is going to be high quality and informative and worth your time. So that's where we're at. So looking forward to some good info tonight, hopefully. I hope that you guys have been staying healthy and happy since last time I saw you, and hopefully tonight will be a nice little highlight for this month. We can end the month on a high note, because my hair just continues to get longer than it has been in years. But always love hanging out with you guys. What else has been going on? We got a few more minutes here before we really get into it. Let me see if I can pull up something I heard actually about what tonight's stream is going to include, just so that we can kind of manage expectations a little bit. Let's see. So if you saw the announcement that they made on social media, the main topic of discussion is going to be the AI system, and lead programmer Kyle Olson is going to be back to discuss the AI system, which should be interesting. But on top of that, let's see, we also got more developments on the UI, and such as like the acclamation system, the quest journal, living codex, all sorts of UI upgrades, and then some continuing that patch notes segment. That's what I have heard will be included in this tonight. So that gives us something to look forward to. I'm gonna refresh their stream to make sure that we're not missing anything, because we should be just moments away. So who do we got here? Who do we got in chat? Ogre of Sparta, hey, good to see you again. Azith 4, Don Lozon, Illyris Mordor, Kalok. Good to have you back, Kalok. I am Bastard 1, Yum Donut 80. I had a donut today. It was not very yum, though, to be honest. I went to good old Dunkin' Donuts, and their donuts have been stale as of lately, which I guess makes sense. It's totally not something that I really should be complaining about right now. Bernadette, Zonk, Animate Acumen. Glad to have you guys here. So yeah, so I if you guys follow me, you notice that I have been pretty quiet lately because, like I said, there hasn't really been that much to talk about lately with Pantheon. That's okay though. I'm used to that. because the development cycle just by nature always has this like ebb and flow. I've been talking about it for years. It's nothing too surprising. But hopefully tonight we'll get some good info that will kind of carry us for a little bit more, that we can give something to sink our teeth into for a little bit. So that'll be exciting. In the meantime, though, I've been working on some other kind of side projects, like behind the scenes type stuff, some real life stuff, of course, but it's good. We're gonna get right back into the Pantheon flow here tonight. Oops, let's make this full screen. That's better.
And welcome everybody to the April 30th, 2020 development update stream for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I'm one of your hosts, Ben Dean, producer of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. As always, with me is Chris Joppa Perkins, creative director.
Hey everybody, excited to be here.
And coming in at the side is Ronik, our senior content creator.
What's up, guys?
And on the phone with us today, for the first time making his Visionary Realms debut on air, is Kyle Olson, our lead programmer. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, guys.
So tell us, Dave, what do we have in store for us today?
Joppa's rocking the
Well, first we're going to start
tonight.
out with a little update on the UI. And then Kyle's going to join us, and we'll talk about the AI, and he's talking about the some of that stuff. And then we're going to get into patch notes and the Q&A at the end.
It sounds like a chock full night. Well, why don't we hop right in then and get started on the UI. So what we're going to show you today is we're going to start off with a few screenshots. We've shown some of the UI in the past. These are gray boxed UI components, but I will turn it over to Chris Perkins to talk more.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey everyone, it's great to be back with you again, talking about what we've been working on over the last month or so. And as David and Ben both said, first thing that we're going to look at tonight is the user interface progress, and that's going to include the character inventory, the climate and the acclimation, the Codex updates that we've talked about a little bit over the last stream. And then we're going to finish off with a look at the quest journal. So let's go ahead and get that first image up. We'll start with the Codex for tonight and just dive right in.
All right, so we've got it.
Yep. Now, as we get started, I want to make a couple points, because those of you who've been watching the streams are going to notice something right away. We're excited to share these things because there's a lot of system development that UI represents. But there's also this gray box component to UI that is the same as any other aspect of development. What you're looking at here is the UI that we've shown in a gray box state. You've heard us talk about this many, many times, but gray box is your best friend in development. It allows functionality to get off the ground quickly. It allows for iteration on that functionality to happen quickly. It allows for visual adjustments to be made quickly based on feedback, the unforeseen, etc. The list goes on and on. So while the final art we've shown of the Codex is just that, the final art, this is how we see it internally. And this is how most likely our testers will be seeing it internally, because this is the approach that makes the most sense developmentally. So with that being said, we're going to jump into what you're actually seeing here. On the right side, you can see the details section that we talked about last time. This is going to give you an exhausted list of the details that you would need to know about an ability, including any mastery updates. So as you upgrade an ability via the mastery system, any additional updates or effects or changes to its fundamental effect is going to be reflected here in the details. You'll see then also the mastery tab, which is where players will be able to invest their mastery points in their abilities to upgrade them. And the key to call out here is, as we said, we want to make sure players are able to see the mastery path. So before any points are invested in an ability via the mastery system, players need to know what those points are going to unlock, and they can make a more informed decision based on that. Did you switch over to the mastery tab?
I have now.
Sweet. So we'll leave that up for just a little bit. But again, it's giving you a visual representation of the points that you've invested, and then it's making sure that you're able to see exactly what you're going to be unlocking for that ability before the points are made. let's go ahead and now move to the character inventory and start showing some of the UI that we have not shown yet. So most of what you're seeing here is self-explanatory. This is a character inventory, but I'm going to call out a few of the things that you may notice immediately. The first is the switch to an anatomical approach for the equipment slots. The second is going to be the inclusion now of the mastery experience bar, as well as a depiction of how many mastery points you have gained up to that point.
Look how much money
You're also
this guy
going to
has.
see what we refer to as on-demand stat information. So whether it be your attributes, your 8 attributes, strength, stamina, constitution, agility, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, or any combination of melee, ranged, spell, and defense, you will be able to choose which of those categories of stat you want to display, and then all of the information of that category that you'd want available. So you can see there with defense, I'm looking at my armor class, I'm looking at my shield rating, my block chance, parry, dodge. For melee, I would want to see, what's my weapon damage for my main and my offhand, what's my hit chance, what's my critical hit chance, what kind of critical damage modifications do I currently have, what do I have any attack speed modifiers. All those things will be able to be reflected there in that kind of on-demand stat window. You'll also see, obviously we've got a section for resistances. We have our storage section down below where your held inventory will be. And then we have our coin section, and you'll notice there the 5 denominations of coinage, copper, silver, gold, platinum, and then a 5th currency that we will unveil at some point in terms of the name, which we're still kind of settling on and deciding for sure. But Pantheon will have 5 denominations of currency with 100-to-1 exchange rate. When I have 100 copper, I can exchange that for a silver, and 100 silver for a gold. And also the weight. Now I want to make a kind of a soft little announcement here that since I think it was a roundtable I did a while back where we said we were taking out weight management from coinage. Since then, both externally and internally, there's been enough input to cause me to rethink that, and really cause us as a team to kind of sit and weigh, okay,
Really?
should coins have weight, should they not? If we have a weight metric and we want to use that and fold that into the fabric of Pantheon's gameplay, and we want to have banks and have banks matter, then coin weight should matter. And so we have decided to
really
go that direction. So
Is there really been that much?
weight is
pushback
important. It's
on
an
that?
important factor. It's going to encumbrance is going to be a
everybody
thing,
hated
and
coin
so
weight.
that's going to affect classes like the monk and classes where, according to their class fantasy, they do better, they perform better with less weight. Is yet to be decided, and certainly something we're going to talk about once that is a little bit more clear. But we know from a general gameplay standpoint that we want weight to matter, and coin is going to factor into that.
And while we're on it too, one of the things that's really going to play into this, and a lot of other things too, is how it ends up playing out. So when we get into pre-alpha 5 or alpha or even beta, and more people get a chance to play, and we see how it works, then we have the kind of data that we need to see if we need to drop back or tweak it or what have you. So view this as a starting point.
Can I pitch Ronix for the extra coin?
You can consider that in the hat. Yep.
Sweet. Awesome.
And the hat is thrown out.
Yeah, I didn't say which hat.
I just want to point out that Jared is extremely rich. Jared took the screenshot, and he's got a lot of platinum.
That's actually silver, so I don't know how rich that is. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
He's got some good coin, but
yeah.
But I think it's important to just
178
reiterate that
million
these are
silver.
gray boxes, and that, there will obviously be graphics behind all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm
for sure. And
skeptical about
you're going to
coin
hear us
weight.
make that point over and over again, and it's just the nature of how public-facing Pantheon's development is, while still very solidly in development. When you go and you see launched games and you watch videos that they put out every so often where they talk about development and they show behind the scenes stuff, you're going to see so much gray box characters, gray box world, gray box systems, UI. It just makes the most sense for the speed of development, because you don't want to be, hundreds and hundreds of hours down in the hole of art and finalizing art to realize one day, oh my goodness, we totally forgot this small piece. And now to go back and get all of that in place is so much more devastating than if everything's in a gray box state and it's easy just to tweak and move. Obviously, that doesn't mean that final art isn't in consideration. Like we've said before with the Codex, we have the final art. This is a layout gray box process that we're in with the Codex, which has nothing to do with a change to the art itself. Let's go ahead and get the next screen up here. So we're in our player inventory. What's not depicted here is the acclamation tab, but you can see as it fades in that this is going to be part of that same base inventory. The first thing that you're going to notice here in the upper section of this window is where you will select the different parts of the body that can be acclimated via items called glyphs. If you're not familiar with our acclimation system, Pantheon will be launching with 6 different extreme climate types that reflect extremes of climate in the environment that are too treacherous, too dangerous for any kind of natural protection alone to mitigate. So a mystical alternative of protection is required, and this is what glyphs are. They are, you can think of them as magically imbued tattoos or markings on the skin that can be applied to different parts of the body and contribute to a total score of acclimation. So in this first section, the top section, that's where I would be choosing the different parts of the body and then applying a glyph to that part of the body, where you can see in the box labeled glyphs go here. These glyphs are going to be varied in their type, in meaning just what climate are they meant to acclimate against or acclimate you to. So you have frigid glyphs, scorching glyphs, etc. But they're also varied in their potency, and so different glyphs are going to provide different amounts of acclimation. So if I'm wanting to protect myself against a frigid climate, I'm going to need to use frigid glyphs. Same if I want to protect myself against a mixture of climates, like a volcanic core where there's scorching and toxic climate present, I'm going to need to mix and match those glyphs appropriately. But I also need to keep an eye on the amount of total acclimation that I have. And that's because there are different tiers of climate that are more dangerous, which we'll discuss here in just a second. You'll see in that middle band is just a representation of the 6 different climates: scorching, frigid, wind shear, anaerobic, pressure, and what is the... Toxic. I knew this was going to happen at some point on a stream. My mind just blank. Scorching, frigid, wind shear, anaerobic, pressure, and toxic. That's what it is. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, chat. So that's a reflection of your current acclimation score. You can see the 6 different acclimation types and how much current acclimation you have towards each one. And then finally at the bottom, when you are in a climate, this view is going to activate and reflect the kind of climate you're in. So when I move into a frigid climate, I'm going to see down there selected the frigid climate. And underneath that, it's going to tell me on the left side, it's going to tell me what tier of climate I'm in. In this case, it's a deadly climate, which is the highest tier. But is the climate I'm in mild? Is it severe, brutal, deadly? What tier of climate I'm in? And then it's also going to show me how protected I am against the different kind of conditions or detrimental effects that climate is going to be trying to apply to me. Based on the amount of acclimation I have, it's going to protect me in a varied degree against those 3 different conditions. And so what you can expect there is obviously the conditions are going to have a name. We've talked about like frozen lungs, for example, for frigid is one of the conditions that can be applied. And you can hover over that condition and it will bring up a tooltip that's actually going to be, explaining a little bit of what that condition is trying to do to you. But then on the other side is something that we're really excited about, and it's also something that the community has been really vocal in pushing for, which is this idea that there would be a degree of natural acclimation that players can generate just by persisting in a climate area. So I may have, a little bit under the score that I need, the acclimation score I need to be fully protected in let's say, a severe frigid climate. But I know that I'm protected enough that if I go in there and I've got, enough provisions and supplies to keep myself going, or I'm in a group that can help me along if I end up, taking a big hit from the climate in some way, I know gradually I'm going to naturally acclimate to that climate up to 20 points, which is really significant when you consider that launch, we're talking about an entire acclimation score of around 200 points total, which is meant to give you plenty of headroom to mix and match when you get into some of those combination climates. So 20 points of acclimation is really significant. And as a starting player, it will even give you a chance to kind of get enough acclimation to potentially survive in the mild climates. And the idea there is to make it to where players are able to get kind of into and experiencing the climate system as early as possible. So it's something that becomes players are just conditioned to know what climates are, how they work, and how they interact with them. So we're really excited about this aspect of the inventory stuff. And like I said at the beginning, these inventory may be boring to some, user interface in general may be boring to some, but it represents system development. You can have a climate and an acclimation system, but if you don't have a vehicle or a method for players to interact with that system, then you don't really have a system. And so these are exciting points of progress for us, because it's how we make sure that these systems are able to be fully experienced and tested in the upcoming testing sessions. So we're super excited to be able to show these off. We'll throw up real quick the last one here, which is the Quest Journal.
Before we get into that, I don't want to spend too much time on questions, but there were a good couple of questions that came up during this acclimation part. One of them was, are we able to max out all acclimations?
No, you will not be able to max out all acclimations. The system is designed to cause you to make those hard decisions. Now, will you be able to get to the point where you can max out, or not even max out, but kind of, a mild climate should not be a threat to a max level character who has invested time in gathering glyphs. What's not shown in this screenshot, which I'm surprised it's not in there, because it was something that was added a few weeks ago at least, but there's, next to that little acclimation tab in the center of that window, there's a little Glyph Pouch tab, and the Glyph Pouch is where your glyphs, when you create a glyph, when you loot a glyph, when you receive a glyph, they are going to go into that Glyph Pouch section. They're going to be sorted and categorized by climate type, and that's where your glyphs will be kind of held. And so I would expect a level 50 player who has accumulated a lot of these glyphs would have no problem existing in a mild or even a severe or even a brutal climate, depending on how long this player's been playing, how many glyphs they've accumulated. But the idea with the climate system is that it's not only meant to be a challenge because of how deadly the individual climates become. It's meant to be a challenge also because of the kind of combinations of climates you're going to start running into. So even at the point where you may have enough glyphs to acclimate you to a deadly climate, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to fare well in a climate that is 2 or perhaps even 3 climates combined, where you're having to consider all of those different climate effects and how you and your group are going to plan for mixing and matching your glyphs. What climates do you perceive to be the most dangerous? What effects are you the most equipped to deal with? Should they overcome one of the members of your raid? So that kind of decision making we want to keep keep really fresh. And at the same time too, glyphs are not going to be permanent. Most likely there will be some just like the progression paradigm and the identity paradigms of things like magical bags. We search and we hunt for those bags that are like weight reducing and biggest slot. There are going to be some mythical kind of legendary glyphs that are almost like really just that infinite use. It's like I can't wait to get my hands on one of those glyphs, because I know once I have that one, it's not going to break, or it's not going to become unusable over time. But there will be a degradation element to these glyphs where either they will, their effectiveness will decay slowly over time, or the nature of removing them to apply a different one would result in the irreparable damage to the one that you've removed. So we want that to be something that players are able to really reach for those really iconic glyphs that are super powerful because of their persistence. But at the same time, we want there to be some level of healthy churn to glyphs, where your decision to deacclimate from this area and now acclimate to this new area is a meaningful one with some cost to it.
CP, a good question from chat.
So,
will some of the races have a starting natural acclimation bonus? Like, say, would the dwarves have a frigid bonus to start?
Yes, they do. If you go back and look at the racial passives, you'll see that some of the races do absolutely have an innate acclimation bonus. And there is a behind the design feature we did a while back in one of the newsletters, where I went into more detail about acclimation specifically and the different ways you can acclimate. Glyphs is the primary way. Natural acclimation is another way. Racial passive bonuses to different types of climate is one way, and then gear will be one way as well. Either entire pieces of gear that are, like a fur inlaid cloak or something like that. That is, again, one of those iconic. It may not be Cloak of Flames level iconic, but if you have a fur inlaid cloak, something like that, that's a big deal, because that's one of the best, best in slot pieces of frigid acclimation gear that is available. At the same time, a crafter who's able to craft, again, one of those high tier pieces of acclimation gear, that's going to be something really important to find. And then also, different gear modifications. Essentially, you could have a cloak that is just a regular cloak, but there may be able to, attach like a fur inlaid collar to that cloak in some way. And when we get, to talking a little bit more about our itemization and some of the ways that items can be modified like that, climbing is another great example of where item modification will play a big part in really getting you to that point where you can kind of be this master climber. It's not just through skill alone. It's going to take some gear progression as well.
So there's a lot of really good questions coming in. It looks like we're going to have to do a whole segment on acclimation in the future. For now, unfortunately, guys, we got to keep moving on, but keep those questions coming as we go. We've got more to show you tonight, though. So let's move on to the next slide. The quest.
Yep. So we'll finish up quickly here. Not anything super exciting to see here, except our lead concept artist Jared, his creativity. And as I talk about this, I would encourage you to go back and pause the stream and really read through this, because it's hilarious. But yeah, this is our quest journal. It's nothing that an MMO player hasn't seen before. We just have on the left side our tree tracking, where you can based on continent. White Thaw is the third continent. It's not here in this. Don't read into that. King's Reach, Rainfall, and White Thaw, all three are part of Pantheon. But here, just again as an example, mock-up layout in gray box that we're developing off of. You've got your tree here on the left with the continent, and then the individual zones, and then even down into some of the different regions of those zones. And then your quest on the right with the quest title. You've got a short little summary statement of the quest. You've got your objective tracking below that. You've got the full NPC dialogue down there at the bottom if you're inclined to go back and read through it, and then a way to abandon the quest if you need to do so.
Right on.
And that is a quick look at some of the inventory progress that we've been making over the month of April. It's exciting stuff.
That is awesome stuff. We have still a whole half of a show to go here, and Kyle has been sitting on voice chat for staying very quiet. So let's switch on over to his segment now, where we're going to tell you a little bit about the work that Kyle's been doing with the AI and whatnot. Actually, Chris, why don't we get you to kick that off too?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been so excited to introduce Kyle and for Kyle to be introduced to the Pantheon community. He is an amazing programmer. I am not a programmer, surprise. And so there are some things that I don't understand in a very highly technical sense when Kyle shares things and talks about things. But the very beginning with Kyle, even if I'm not completely understanding all the nuances and the technical terms, his ability to communicate, his ability to communicate with authority and clarity and confidence, I think is something that all of you are going to appreciate. His expertise is amazing, and so I've been really excited to kind of. I know.
If he was on camera, you would see him blushing right now.
You're not on camera, so
bad.
You don't have to worry about like how red the face is getting. So, but he's the other cool thing about Kyle is he's a programmer who is actually a very high level gamer as well. I mean, Kyle, what was your in World of Warcraft Mythic Plus, like I push
high keys in WoW. It's hard to put numbers on it and stuff, but yeah, I push pretty high in Mythic Plus and World of Warcraft and in Arena and stuff for sure.
Yeah, however you feel about WoW, when you are a programmer who also is a gamer on that level, the kinds of nuances and ins and outs of gameplay and programming meets gameplay, responsiveness, the interconnectivity of the different systems, it's really amazing. And so this is an opportunity to introduce you to Kyle, but also just kind of share in our appreciation and our confidence in him as our lead programmer to do what it's going to take to make Pantheon an amazing game. So on that front, I've kind of put together some little tee-up questions for him to ask him, and then give him the chance to go into the things he wants to say about these things. But obviously the point here is AI, NPC AI. So we've done some refactoring work with the NPC AI, and there's some good reason for that. I know we've talked about kind of the designer-driven goal and how some of the work you've been doing is helping with that. So can you talk a little bit about that paradigm shift and
Sure.
some of the work you've been doing?
Yeah, so as you said, we recently pushed up our big AI refactor. With it comes with some standard stuff that you would get, like bug fixes, performance improvements, client and server side. But some of the more intricate stuff is, like you said, opening up the AI to be controlled externally by designers through node graphs or bespoke scripts that we want to write as programmers for a very specific boss fight, whatever it ends up being. It was pretty difficult for us to sort of take full control, and for one of our boss fights, it ends up being fairly hard coded with the old system just to sort of get things off the ground and test things out. The new system, very easily externally controlled. We can do node graphs, custom scripts, whatever it ends up being, gives us full control over it.
It's a big deal.
Very much so.
Hard-coded, just if you're not familiar with that term, that essentially means I'm a designer, I with an encounter idea, I take my idea to a programmer and say, hey, you need to stop what you're doing, stop what you're focused on, and hard code program my encounter and make it work the way I want it to. Whereas that burden really should be on the designer to be able to come up with the encounter and then have the tools necessary to do that. And
so this doesn't necessarily need to be a programmer to do that, right? To visually sort of test out your ideas, get them out there working, not have to recompile the game, just reload the zone, reload the NPC, test it away, move some stuff around, modify some variables, whatever you got to do. It's very visual, very hands-on.
Yeah, man. It's exciting for just the speed of content development. The more that the designers are able to do without bugging the programmers, for each point of content, it's a win for everybody.
Yeah.
When we talk about refactoring, we also talk about with refactoring comes typically some, like, and even like you said, some performance boosts and some gains there. So what kind of gains have we seen performance-wise?
Depends on where you're looking. If it's a really heavy, large zone with lots of mobs, upwards of 35, even high 30s% performance improvements. And we actually measured this prior to getting some of the more significant improvements in there. There was a couple things on the initial push that weren't working properly and gave us worse performance than we actually have even now. So I'd be willing to bet some of the more expensive zones we're seeing upwards of a 40% improvement in CPU usage, which, I mean, if we want to do crazy stuff with our AI, we got to have the room on the CPU to add that extra stuff in. So
AI is notoriously a really process intensive
very much so. Yeah.
Even back in
one of the other big things that we get out of this too is for programmers. So it's not just designer improvements. If a programmer day to day needs to get in there and work on AI, it was pretty tightly coupled to our networking layer. So we've abstracted away all networking from the AI. So as a programmer, if I want to get in there and start creating custom nodes for designers to use, I don't have to think about the networking layer anymore at all. It's taken care of for you.
So let's talk about networking a little bit.
Sure.
And I know when we were talking earlier today, one of the key wins that we've gotten here, specifically regarding NPC AI, is that the AI is now respecting the networking framework. So can you go into that a little bit? Kind of try to make that as digestible to non-programmers as you can. But I love what you're able to kind of share on this front.
Sure. One of the things that we've been sort of working towards is implementing our own custom network stack. It's already tested, working very well. The problem is a lot of our code is not architected in a way that makes it easy to just rip out the netcode from it. So a lot of the abstractions or the refactoring that we've been doing and abstracting those network layers as we readdress these specific systems is in preparation for swapping out that network layer. In abstracting away the netcode from a complex system, it becomes much easier to just replace that abstracted bottom layer out. So as the code becomes more robust, cleaner, abstracted away some of that complexity can just be ripped out from underneath everything and replaced, and everything still just works. So that's one of the big ticket items that we're looking at when we do any of these refactors is the future compatibility with high performance networking.
Now, networking is a buzzword when it comes to MMOs, and I think it's somewhat kind of common thought anyway that the biggest obstacle to I want to make an MMO in my garage and I want build it from the ground up and I just want to make an MMO is okay. Well, what are you going to? What's your solution to that kind of mass player networking that you need? You need that high performance networking, and so. One of the things I'm most excited about is your vision for the networking and the networking library and all that. So can you just talk a little bit about that? And
sure. I mean, yeah, the entire premise of this library is built on code generation and leveraging some of C# high performance features that have come out in this last year, 7.0, et cetera. We're leveraging a lot of the newer features, specifically the memory management features and mapping to unmanaged memory from managed memory in C#, and getting rid of a lot of the overhead of what would normally be considered bad, to use a garbage collected language, for high performance sockets. It's not really the case so much anymore. If you're leveraging a lot of the more modern C# features, at least, you can write some pretty crazy high performance stuff in C# these days.
Do you have any numbers for us? Like any ways to kind of say I know there were some visuals that you were able to show back in the day.
Sure.
With some of the
in our tests in all of our servers, we're fully maxing out the box's network interface card before we're even close to maxing out a CPU. So we're talking 1,000 megabits a second throughput in a network library on a single machine, and the CPU is just laughing at it, kind of thing, right? So we can't get hard numbers because it's too fast. We would need to scale up our tests to get better numbers.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is network performance is not going to be an issue. And
exactly.
That's a good day. That's awesome. Any other general thoughts you've got, man?
That's it for me, really.
Well said. Cool. Well,
Thanks for
glad to
joining
be
us,
able to
Kyle.
introduce you guys.
Yeah.
Hey, good to be here. Good to meet everybody. Hope you'll be back soon.
Oh, you will be.
Kyle, you
will
need to get a name. Everybody in the chat wants you to have.
What's wrong with Kyle?
You need to get a name.
I mean, if your name was Fred and your code name was Kyle, maybe.
There we go. Yeah, that works.
We're gonna have a contest to have the fans name you.
I like that idea. All right, so what's next on the agenda?
I recommend naming the denomination of coin after him, like somebody I know. We'll talk about that.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out why I look like Super Mario in 1982, but whatever.
Can you do the Mario voice?
Yeah,
Quick.
I don't know what's going on.
So what's next? We got patch notes next,
We've got
right?
patch notes. I feel like we need a big screen splash page for the patch notes. Patch notes and like some music. Maybe.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Maybe a band in the corner playing. For now, patch notes.
Let's do this. Okay, so for the month of April, this is not exhaustive, but this is a nice list of some of the highlights over this past month. So here we go. The world origin established, center of the world located, and all zones oriented appropriately.
Whoops. Is that their stream? Is that
several large zones split into multiple zones to improve load times? Also addressing more real-world zone aggro behavior. On April 7th, the Merc and the Silent Plains came online. Deal. The new Black Rose Keep location and supporting environment. We have an updated Mad Run Cave, and the new orc models have been integrated into the game.
That's exciting. Maybe
we've
see some of those.
We've had the game-wide stat overhaul and the full deep stat integration, which we showed off a little bit on the last stream. This is one of my favorite patch notes of all, was this one on April 8th. Everything is climbable. That's a big deal.
That's a lot to be said in that short sentence.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I cannot overstate, and I am not exaggerating when I say that the moment that everything became climbable in Pantheon internally was the moment the game felt most like what it is destined to be. I mean, just sit long enough to imagine the implications of, in MMOs we're used to playing. It's not that climbing is a new thing, obviously, in single player games, and there's been, a few MMOs along the way who have had some limited climbing where, specific climbing sections where you can climb. But when you see something, when you're running around, in Avenir Pass, let's say, and you see something high off the ground, and your first immediate thought is, okay, how far around the base of this do I need to go to find the path? Like, how wide is this thing? How do I really want to run all the way around? No, you just climb. Just start climbing up to it. You see something up in a tree that you want to grab a hold of, and you just climb up the tree to grab it.
If you're good enough,
if you're good enough, that's right. It is nothing less than game changing. Now that doesn't make any other system and aspect of Pantheon any less important, and it doesn't mean that climbing is the preeminent point of Pantheon, but it means that one of the ways that meant so much to us to be able to push the genre forward and create a true differentiator for this game that was meaningful and not just tacked on and fluff, was to really fully embrace this. And that's my favorite patch notes of the list. Cannot wait for our testers to get and experience that. Continuing on, first pass of mastery experience gain. The first pass of the new character inventory. So we're seeing these inventories go from just screenshots to actually being integrated into the game. It's been a massive amount of progress on the quest and perception system. Just the underlying node network that governs that and the amount of quest content that's making its way into the game now is really exciting. Into more kind of some small form updates here. We had a small refactor around ability cast canceling. Still some visual work to do on that, but some good progress on that front to make that fluid. fixed a critical hit damage bonus from attack and spell power. The new spell power conversion for damage and healing numbers was implemented. Got formula scaling for intended top end of attack and spell power numbers at max level before buffs. So how much spell power you would be able to, and attack power generate through your attributes and through itemization by the time you reach max level before buffs are applied. So formula tweaks to get that where we want it to be. Heals can now properly show up as critical heals and scrolling combat text. You have the first pass of partial resist in for spell damage based on target resistances and the new resistance stat system and spell power stats. We've had some aura effect controller performance improvements. We fixed a bug where procs could trigger themselves to proc again. So infinite proc loops, anyone? Talk about some DPS there. Fixed a bug that was removing passives on logging in. We've seen an efficiency upgrade for NPC wander behavior and small tweaks to the move around state. Fixed melee animations being overridden from entity status type changes. On April 9th, we had our first round of AI and pathing robustness updates, which is a lot of what Kyle was discussing earlier. We have NPC chat bubbles in now and hooked up, and they are able to respond to player proximity as well as other NPC proximity and fit really well within our quest and our perception storyline systems. We've adjusted NPC hitboxes across the board to make them just easier to select and loot, especially with smaller NPCs. There's been, with the NPC AI refactor, was a pretty significant threat refactoring as well, which was also a huge improvement performance-wise. And just to wrap up, we've had a few rounds of polish on our one-handed slashing and blunt and piercing auto attack animations. We have a new emote for cheering, waving, and conversating. So when you're speaking with NPCs and just kind of the emote conversating movements that they do. And the monk has been on the animation block, getting several of their animations in. Their unique combat idol as a monk, their main and offhand auto attacks, Furry Punch, Gale Kick, Blazing Hand Strike. These animations have gone in over this last month as well. So again, just a small offering there of a lot of the work that's been happening over April. Exciting stuff.
Ben, we got some time for some questions?
Yeah, we do. We have about 3 minutes, so let's pick some good ones.
Let's try to make them on topic if possible. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Kyle in particular, just tag me in the chat.
Or even if you had a question earlier that we didn't get around to.
That's a first.
Oh, they're typing up really long questions, really complicated questions.
What is going into the face slot, CP?
That could be a mask. That could be, some type of, gnomish mask, or some kind of a mystical eyeglass or monocle.
A rebreathing device so that we can swim underwater forever.
It could be a rebreathing device. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Unless you're a dark mirror and you don't need to worry about it. A dark mirror. Excuse me.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump on you there, Dave. I know that you like taking those questions and you do a good job at it. But there is one question here that I think a lot of people want to know. It's a good question, and it is about PA5. What is left to work on before PA5? So I can't answer that completely because the list is a list. But one of the major things right now is actually what Kyle is speaking on today. Like so the AI work has been done. A large block that still remains to be done before PA5 is the abilities. We spoke briefly about the refactoring and working these abilities into the new node-based system too. So that's kind of the biggest hurdle in front of us right now. That's kind of the bulk of the work that's left before PA5.
Getting super close.
We are, yeah.
Okay. Here's a question about the AI. What is the extent of how AI can function outside designer control? Kyle, can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, right now they just have simple states, unless the designers take full control and do things themselves, in which case, I mean, whatever they want to do, it can do. But it just has like idle, patrol, routines, wander, combat, I think, and leash. Those are the 6 states that it can be in, unless under direct control of a designer.
Got it. CP, will there be a way to combat climates if I'm wielding a torch? Will it somewhat help frigid climate? So I guess they're asking kind of our other items besides glyphs and, will that affect that as well?
Yep. So that would fit into the item category. So there would be, things like that. A torch would be a great and very direct example of that. That could be extrapolated out to a campfire. We actually have just a little, another bean. Campfires are going to play a pretty big role in Pantheon in terms of like your recovery. We've talked before about, moving through a dungeon. We want to develop some natural resting places or natural safe places where you can, set up a camp or you can, log out to start again. And campfires will be part of signaling those areas. Your health, your mana regeneration will recuperate more quickly sitting next to a campfire. But there'll also be benefits in climate situations like that to set up a campfire there specifically. If you're, wanting to give your acclimation time to naturally accumulate and, things like that. If you're just under even with natural acclimation, and so you want your pull spot where you're wanting to pull enemies to, you might build a campfire there to kind of create your home base in those environments. And then there would be, other ways that items would play into the different climates as well. So yeah, definitely.
Great. Somebody's asking a question about the gnome model getting an update like the last 3 races. Do you want to speak on that at all?
There's no planned update for the gnome model in that sense, except their actual like base look is not final yet, not finished yet, in terms of how they're going to look, naked, as it were. But there is, and I understand the reveal we did with the Dark Myrrh and the Scar and the Archai. There are going to be some material improvements and tweaks and shader improvements and tweaks to the other races. And so in that sense, the gnome will probably visually improve some based on that, but there's not any planned changes to the actual model itself.
Great.
All right, folks, we're running...
you're done?
Yeah, we're running close on time here. Well, we're over time, but do we have any more? We can probably take 1 or 2 more.
This is a good question. Can mobs climb everything as well?
The famous question.
That's a great question. And it's something that Kyle and I have gone fairly deep into, specifically because Kyle's done so much work on the climbing system and on the NPC AI and pathing and all that stuff. And so that's one of those places where design and programming really have to meet in pretty deep ways to make sure that all of those circumstances are covered. But the goal in my mind, and based on my understanding of what we're capable of doing well, is that as a game-changing kind of thing, climbing affects the way we think about NPC design. And so NPCs need a way to deal with you when you're in a climbing state. And so there will most likely be kind of an arsenal of abilities that most NPCs are able to switch to if they're pursuing you and you move into a climbing state. So whether that be a spider spitting venom, or things picking up rocks and throwing them, or having throwing weapons, or cases where NPCs potentially would be able, if appropriate, like a spider, to actually engage in that climbing with you and continue to attack you and pursue you while you're on the wall. So I don't know if that's anything that you want to speak to, Kyle, by the way.
Yeah, technically there's no limitation there. It's purely whatever design ends up coming up with and whatever we end up wanting to do. I know we've talked about spiders and things that are obvious that should be able to climb, and humanoids. If I'm a humanoid and I can climb a wall, the NPC should be able to chase me and climb after me, right? So that's totally fine and dandy. But we've also talked about things like, what do you do with a pet who, like a wolf? What happens with it? We've talked about things like, having it on your shoulders or other things like that. There's lots of ways that we can solve depending on the problem that we're addressing.
Put it in your pocket.
There
Well,
you go.
gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for the stream today, and to our audience, thank you for coming in. Your questions were awesome. I really appreciate your support. Just a reminder too that Pantheon is a crowdfunded game, largely moves forward because of your pledges. If you feel like checking them out, head on over to PantheonMMO.com and hit on that pledge button and see what is available there. Thanks for joining us, guys, and we wish you all and all of yours a very good night and the rest of the week.
That was a blast being with you all again. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Kind of debrief here a little bit. There's a lot of acronyms in that stream. we got NPCs, we got AI, we got UI. There's lots of like good little nuggets in there though, I think. I'll start off with saying though, the first thing that kind of struck me though is the comment about coin weight. And I know I talked about it earlier. I'll elaborate my opinion a little bit more about their stance on changing their stance on whether or not currency in game should have a weight to it. And they used to say no, it's not going to have weight. And now it seems like they're leaning strongly towards having a weight. Is my mic? Well, I don't know why my mic is being quiet. I'm just gonna have to talk louder, I guess. Anyway, so coin having weight. I am pretty. I was in agreement with their original decision, where the justification was that giving coin a weight is not a really effective way to add fun to the game. And this is a classic kind of conundrum for designers of any type of game, where you want it to, yes, be immersive and realistic, but there are some parts of that immersion that just become tedious and they're not fun, and it makes it feel like a chore. And ultimately, everybody plays games to have fun. Now, sometimes that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's always easy. Sometimes the fun is in the challenge and the tension, but my perspective is that giving coin weight it's not really a challenge. It doesn't really create that many interesting dynamics. It just kind of makes it so that you have to run back to the bank more frequently, which in and of itself is going to feel like a chore pretty quickly. Like, there have been games that have had where the coins have had weight, and that feature was eventually removed because it wasn't really adding anything meaningful to the game. That's my opinion. I know people say that, like, it makes banks, the interesting decision or the meaning is giving banks more purpose. I don't know. I don't feel like banks need more of a purpose. I think people are going to use banks already because, there's going to be so many just items that you need to store. I just don't think that having to run back to the bank is going to be fun. So my bet is that once it gets into testing and more people actually get their hands on it and start, playing a lot more, and after a while they're going to be like, you know what? It's not really worth it. That's my prediction. Feel free to differ, but that's where I'm at on that. Other than that, they mentioned a lot of great things actually. Like I said, there's a lot of cool little nuggets of improvements that they mentioned in the stream, such as the climbing system, which that's great. And I actually not that long ago made a video specifically about climbing. And if you haven't seen that, go to my YouTube channel and check it out. It goes into all of the details that we have so far about how the climbing system actually works, and it's kind of validating to hear Joppa talk about how like kind of underrated. In the video, if you watch it, you'll see how I talk about how I think that the climbing system is drastically underrated in Pantheon, and people don't really I don't think they appreciate how much potential it has to really completely change the way you play the game. And Jabba kind of alluded that to it a little bit, where if adding the 3-dimensional aspect to movement, where it's not just walking from point A to point B and figuring out the route, and you can kind of just you can be so much more creative and kind of create your own routes and say, oh, instead of having to go around this way, I just can go up this way. That I think is a meaningful improvement to the game and to the genre, in my opinion. So I'm really looking forward to playing around with that. Other than that, there was also the Silent Plains, he said, is a new zone that just got implemented. They moved BRK again, which is interesting, but you know, it's good that the world is taking shape. And let's see, what else was there? Oh, Campfires. That's another, like, just like a little, it may seem insignificant, but like I think that is a cool, like, meaningful improvement. So yeah, overall not bad. I do want to acknowledge, though, and kind of empathize with the people out there that might be feeling like these, you know, the past several newsletters have been talking a lot about, like, the living Codex and how that works, and the UI improvements and stuff. And these are all very important things, and I've enjoyed watching every one of these streams. But I do want to mention too, though, that I know that there is probably a pretty big majority, actually, of people out there that feel like this sort of information isn't necessarily enough. I'm sure, like I said, here and even in the audience here that we're all hanging out. We're all probably pretty dedicated fans that just, you know, enjoy taking whatever we can get about the game. But it definitely, there's a part of me that empathizes with the broader general audience out there, that they need more significant proof, basically. And so I do, there is that part of me that hopes and is waiting to get to that moment where all the stuff that they have been talking about can actually be experienced. Like, that's a huge turning point. It's one thing to talk about it, but when you're and for us to hear about it, but when we can actually get our hands on it and experience it firsthand, that will change everything. And I think it is long overdue. You know, these things take time. I'm sure they're going as fast as they can, but there's a lot of anticipation building up here, so that's going to be a really critical moment, I think. So it's exciting, though. Overall, it's really exciting. It always surprises me that, for me personally, what little things get me excited to play the game. Like, the thing about Campfires, like, you find, like, a good pulling spot in a dungeon, and you know, one of the things that you want to remember to do is to, like, set up a campfire there, because it gives you, like, certain bonuses, and you set up your little base there and settle in. Like, that in and of itself makes me like I want to get in there and experience that firsthand. So it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. That's pretty much my thoughts for it, for this one anyway. Like I said though, I think this gives me enough stuff. I'll head over to YouTube and get back into the YouTube grind of putting out some more digestible videos for people out there that don't necessarily have time to watch this whole video. I'm just reading through your guys' comments. I know there's a lot of valid opinions about stuff like coin weight in particular. Ultimika says, isn't food in the sense of periodically eating out, or am I wrong about that? Yeah, that is another thing. So that's a perfect example that a few months back Joppa mentioned that just having to you won't have to just carry food and water in your inventory because your character needs to be passively eating and drinking all the time. They took that idea out and replaced it with food that's more of a like active consumable that that gives you certain types of benefits when you eat and drink it. And the reason is it's the exact same reason that having your character just have to passively consume something that's taking up spaces in your inventory, that's not fun. Like, yes, it may be realistic because people need to eat and drink periodically to survive, but they also need to poop. But you don't see characters popping a squat out in the woods, like, because that wouldn't be fun. And the same reason that just having to just eat for the sake of eating, that it kind of gets like a chore, and then it's taking up spaces in your inventory, and then when it gets low you just have to run back to town and spend a few copper to get more food. And it's like, is that like memorable? No. And I look at coin weight in that same class of mechanics where it's like, yes, it's immersive technically, but it doesn't really add anything of value to the game. It doesn't make me want to play the game more. Like, it's not like, oh, I can't wait to log in later so that I can eat some food. Like, it doesn't happen. So it's a huge part of game design is trying to boil the game down to what is fun. And again, I'll say it again because it's important that sometimes short-term misery might be a good thing for gameplay, even if it's not fun constantly, because it might get certain like boss fights or stuff might get discouraging, but the key difference there is that as long as that there's something that you can do about it, if you feel like your decision-making process can have an impact and an effect and improve your chances of winning the next time, like, that is satisfying to the human brain, and that ultimately adds to the fun. But forcing people to just run errands is not fun. People generally try to play games to get away from having to run errands like that. So that's where I'm at. I won't say any more about it, but that's my perspective. Also, though, while we're on the topic of coins, I mentioned it in chat, but if I want to reiterate it in case that any devs that happen to be hanging out, I would like to put in my suggestion for the name of the 5th currency, which, by the way, I think it's kind of cool that there's 5 denominations of currency in the game. I don't have a particularly strong opinion about that. Like, I would, you could probably make it work with some games, just work with 1 currency. 5 currencies, though, I don't know necessarily why they decided to go with that. Maybe they'll get into that more later, but I think it's cool. That 5th mystery currency above platinum, though, I would suggest naming them Eridunes. That sounds like a cool name for a currency. And then they could be like little green coins, like almost like emerald coins. That's my vote. On that, I think I'm gonna head out, guys. I hope that you have a great night and a great weekend. And remember, we will reconvene in 1 month, roughly. Doing these once a month now. I realize that I probably could. There's not technically nothing stopping me from streaming more often than that. And maybe if some big significant Pantheon news breaks out, maybe I will see you before then. But the next scheduled one will be a month from now, because again, I want you to know that when you get that notification pops up that says BazgrimTV is now live on Twitch, I want you to know that it's going to be something good. It's going to be something worth watching. So with that in mind, guys, we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.